Scotty McLennan grew up in Lake Forest, Illinois, spent most of his life in Boston area, and has been in Stanford, California for almost 2 decades now. He is a lawyer and a minister who was a university chaplain at Tufts and Stanford for 30 years and now teaches ethics at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. He is a graduate of the Hotchkiss School and remembers fondly playing football and hockey against Taft. Please help me welcome Mr. McLennan.
So sorry about that Hotchkiss part, but it's, we're all here in the same part of New England and enjoy each other, I'm sure. Let me get this. So thanks, Joe, for that introduction. And thank you, Reverend G, Rev G, who I knew from Milton Academy, where my 2 children were students, and he was the chaplain and taught them ethics well, I believe. So thank you for that. So what I want to do with you today is maybe a little unusual, which is teach a case that I have taught for many years at the Stanford Business School and other locations at Stanford. And to teach this kind of case, I teach Socratically, which means that I pretty soon get away from this podium and I move around the room and I try to engage you in discussion and try to get you to talk to each other and try to ask you some questions back and forth about where we are in the case. And let me set it up for you. It's the parable of the sadhu, which was written by, and it appeared in the Harvard Business Review some years ago, written by Bowen McCoy, who was a Stanford undergraduate and then went to Harvard Business School, from there to Wall Street, ultimately a managing director at Morgan Stanley, and then he became an ordained ruling elder of the Presbyterian Church, along with being a investment banker on Wall Street. So I'm going to describe the case to you, and as the details will go up on the board here as we talk, and then I'll move out to engage you in some discussion about it. So listen carefully. A life-changing event occurred when Bowen McCoy was on a 6-month sabbatical, and at about the halfway point of a Himalayan trek, approaching an 18,000-foot pass, which he'd have to get over in order to continue for his next month of his trip. 6 years earlier, he'd suffered acute altitude sickness in the Himalayas at 16,500 feet. He had to be taken down to a Nepalese home where he spent 5 days in bed recovering. This time he was at 15,500 feet, only 1,000 feet below where he'd succumbed to altitude sickness the last time. His only Western companion was an anthropologist named Stephen, and they'd hired Nepalese porters to carry all their gear and Sherpa guides to tell them exactly where to go and how. Besides potential altitude sickness, another problem was that they didn't get over the pass early in the day. They were starting up from their high camp even before sunrise. They didn't get over early in the day. There was a risk of the spring sun melting the ice steps on the treacherous slope near the top of the pass, and they could fall to their death. Even if that didn't happen, not getting over the pass would mean that the last half of Bowen McCoy's once-in-a-lifetime trip would be ruined. Just after daybreak, a climber from a 4-person New Zealand group further up the mountain came staggering down with a body slung over his shoulder. It was an unconscious, almost naked, barefoot Indian holy man called a sadhu. He'd been found lying on the ice, literally freezing to death. Bowen McCoy cradled the sadhu's head as he was gently laid out on some rocks. The New Zealander, however, was angry, wanting to get across the pass before the bright sun melted the ice steps. He said, "Look, I've done what I can. You have porters and Sherpa guides. You care for him. We're going on." And he turned and went back up the mountain to rejoin the other New Zealanders. Bowen McCoy felt for a pulse and found that the sadhu was still alive. Stephen and Bowen McCoy immediately opened their packs, began finding clothes to cover the sadhu from head to foot. Within a few minutes, he'd regained consciousness. Although he wasn't able to walk, within a little while it was clear that the sadhu was very much alive. Bowen knew that there was a Japanese mountaineering group behind them on the mountain with a horse. And without a great deal of thought, he told Stephen and the head Sherpa guide, Pasang, that he was so concerned about the potential of altitude sickness and that he wanted to get over the pass and go on. So he took off after several of the porters who'd already gone ahead. An hour after McCoy reached the summit, Stephen arrived and immediately said, "How do you feel about contributing to the death of a fellow human being?" Bowen McCoy didn't understand. "Is the sadhu dead?" he asked Stephen. "No," Stephen replied, "but he surely will be." As Stephen then explained, he'd stayed with the sadhu until the Japanese party arrived with their horse, but they'd refused to transport the sadhu down the mountain to an unheated hut some 1,000 feet further down, because they were also trying to get over the pass before the ice steps melted. The Sherpa guide, Pasang, also refused to have a group of their porters carry the sadhu down to the hut for the same reason, especially with other porters and Bowen McCoy now already ahead up on the mountain. And no one knows if the sadhu lived or died. So there's the case. So now, if you were in his shoes, if you were Bowen McCoy, at that time and place, what do you think you would do under the circumstances? And let's get into some discussion about this. This means somebody's going to need to try to answer that question.
We have some microphones too. Billy's got one.
Yeah, where are the mics? Mic there, mic here.
Steve's got one.
You got one. Someone go ahead. Where's the handle?
We got some up here too. Got no.
I see some hands up there. Sorry, where are they? Where's it?
I would try and save his life.
I'm sorry, where are you in the hall here? There. You would try to save his life, even though you know that this will end your trip. You've got another month to go, and you put in all of this trouble and all of this money and all of that. You're going to stop your trip now and save his life.
Yes.
So is there anyone in this whole hall who sees it differently and has a different answer to that question?
Over here.
Yeah.
I'd continue the expedition.
Whoa, where did that come from? hold that thought. Let's get this thought here.
What I would do, it's not really my fault. The sadhu was up here with no clothes or anything, like acting out. So I would try and help him my best, but if I couldn't like save him, I wouldn't really feel that bad.
I mean, honestly, you've already done something, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you've already gotten him in. You've got clothes on him. You've got some food into him. He's regained consciousness. The people ahead of you got him out of the snow. So you're all kind of doing your bit. So yeah, and it's not your fault that he's up there, right? So yeah. How about that? Another thought, and I hear a female voice. That's good.
Just to that point, when people are dying of hypothermia, sometimes they feel like they're burning, so they do take off all their clothes. So he could have been really well prepared, but then.
Well, in truth, he was naked in the snow when they found him.
Yes, I know, I understand that, but so. I'm just saying that a lot of the time.
We're not going to get through this with all this noise around this great response.
When people have died in the snow of hypothermia, oftentimes they have been found naked.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. And
Okay.
I would try to save him.
Okay. So, but by the way, what would you do under these circumstances?
I would try to save him.
So I need another person to help us think of why you might not want to save him. Why you might want to do something different. Sorry, up there, yeah, you were.
Wait, is it working? Oh, okay, cool. I'd give the sadhu to the Japanese and make them take it down.
Make them.
Yeah.
Force those Japanese to use their horse.
Yes.
Now, how would you do that? How would you make another culture You know, this is a WASP guy. This is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant guy from Wall Street. He's going to force a Japanese party behind him. I don't know how good his Japanese is. He's going to force them to take him down.
Yes.
Really? Okay. Other thoughts here?
Excuse me.
Yeah, I want to go first.
I'm not doing good.
Standing up.
Yeah, good. Standing up.
You could just leave him there. Like, that's where he was. He probably had a good reason to be there.
Okay, interesting point.
Yeah, maybe he wanted to be there.
Sorry?
Maybe he wanted to be there.
Okay, well, no, let's take that seriously for a moment. There's a lot of noise around you. How can you hear yourself? Or how can I hear you? But so what if this guy, as an Indian holy man, had just gone to there was a pilgrimage spot actually over the 18,000-foot pass. Let's say he'd gone through as an Indian holy man, felt he had through eons and eons of existence. He had finally been reincarnated so many times that he'd made it to a human stage and a human holy man stage. And he was trying to step out of the cycle of rebirth into nirvana, moksha, or basically be out of the cycle of rebirth completely. He'd gone through some kind of ceremony, taken off his clothes, and been sent by all of the monks around him and others down to freeze to death and to pass out of the cycle of rebirth. And along come these do-gooding Westerners who say, oh, we're going to save a life, as we were carrying up here. What about respecting his autonomy as a moral duty?
Like,
Yeah.
He never said
Wait a
that he
minute,
was
I
doing this
hear
for
another.
one thing. He didn't let anyone know that he was doing this cultural thing. So like, when you're faced with someone who needs help, the human reaction is just to help them.
So you need to make your own choice when you don't know the cultural realities.
Yes.
Don't you have an obligation to try to figure out the cultural realities?
How are you gonna figure it out if he's unconscious?
Now, he's conscious now. He's speaking now. However, let me just push with you. In fact, he doesn't speak your language. You don't speak his language. The Nepalese porters don't speak his language. The Sherpa doesn't speak his language. So, in fact, you can't communicate. So how do you know? Here's a woman I'd like to get this mic to. There we go.
Most Hindus are supposed to be cremated.
Sorry?
Most Hindus are supposed to be cremated, so I feel like if they really wanted to end the cycle, they wouldn't do it through snow.
Okay, so you're saying this doesn't make sense. He would have been cremated. So
Culturally, yeah.
you know from your cultural knowledge that in fact, he really doesn't want to be dying here now, and therefore saving him is an all right way to go.
Yeah, also sadhus don't wear many clothes and when they take hike, because
They don't wear clothes anyway, so that's not
they don't not wear clothes, like they're not like flashy.
not many clothes.
They wear like sheets and stuff, and
Right.
even in the Himalayas, I hiked the Himalayas and I met one once. There are really hot parts of the Himalayas. There are freezing cold parts. So if was just in a really hot part and he started his hike up and he didn't realize, it's just
Okay.
kind of makes sense.
All right, so let me now move to talking about how we've been analyzing this case. And if we get the next slide up on Potter's box, before you put anything into it, thank you. Potter is an ethicist at Harvard, or was, Ralph Potter, and he claims that anytime you're having moral dialogue, as we've been having here, or actually doing any kind of decision making, there's always 4 factors that are involved. And now the first is facts, the second is loyalties, the third is a mode of ethical reasoning that you're using, and the fourth is a worldview. And you can see as we've been having this discussion that in fact we've been involving a lot of these issues. So for example, under facts, let's see if this works. And I need to put on my own glasses because I can't even read what that says from here. I hope you can read this. So under facts, why is the sadhu here? So we've asked that question. What else have we got? What does he want to do? And is helping him putting my own life at risk? We didn't talk too much about that, but Bowen McCoy has altitude sickness. He had altitude sickness the last time he was here. You've got these porters that have gone ahead, and you're splitting the party. And so maybe you're putting a lot of people at risk, and we didn't talk about that by leaving, if you were to try to stay there with him. You've already got people that have gone up the mountain, and you've split your party. So, but also terminating your Himalayan trek. We may not spend enough time on that, but you've got some facts. Now, loyalties. Obviously, you have, as Bowen McCoy, a loyalty to yourself and saving your own life. You have some kind of loyalty to the sadhu and to your traveling companions like Stephen, and also your porters and so on. And you also have ethnicity, nationality, gender issues here. This white guy from New York, what does he know about Nepalese culture, etc. And by the way, what if this had been a white American woman in a LL Bean outfit on the side? Would he have left her? So there's issues around ethnicity and race and nationality and gender involved. Okay, now what kind of mode of ethical reasoning have we been talking about? So you can have ends-based reasoning, utilitarian, greatest good for the greatest number. Are you going to save your party, or are you going to save this one person, especially if there's risks of people dying at these ice steps further up? Duty-based, we've talked about two already. Save a life, some of you say, but perhaps respect his own autonomy if, in fact, he may be trying to step out of the cycle of rebirth. And then virtue-based, do you have courage to step up even if you're putting your own life at risk? Do you have love for a fellow human being? And then finally, worldviews. You may have a mountaineering worldview, which either says, look, if somebody's hanging from a rope, and we're tied to them, and we can't get them back up after they've fallen, you cut the rope. Or maybe a mountaineering ethic is different, or a mountaineering worldview, which is, no, you actually let people, you hang together, so you all live together or die together. An economic worldview, this is a guy from Wall Street, he wants to get to the top, he's only thinking in terms of money and how much he spent on this trip and so on. You might have a religious worldview. This guy's a Christian, and he's interacting here with Hindus, with a Hindu, so how do those clash, perhaps, those worldviews? And then he's an American, he has all kinds of ideas about pursuing his own happiness and his own freedom and so on. So Ralph Potter claims that any decision you make always involves all of these. And I think this is like such a useful framework. You should somehow get it in your head and remember it for the rest of your life. Because literally anytime you're in a decision-making context or talking to others about making decisions, you're always going to find that there are facts at issue. There's loyalties, a mode of ethical reasoning that's operative, whether you know it or not, and a worldview that's operative. And if you change just one thing, if you change just your loyalty from yourself to the sadhu, or your religious worldview, or the mode of ethical reasoning you're using, you just change one thing, and it will change your ultimate decision. I think ultimately that the facts are what we often discuss, and we think that we've got the whole thing down if we're just talking facts. But loyalties are critically important, a little more unconscious often. Mode of ethical reasoning we almost never think through. Are you using ends-based reasoning or duty-based reasoning? Are you thinking about your own virtues? And the worldview is often very unconscious. So anyway, to the extent we can bring this all to light, and you can at least get in the same quadrant as you're having discussions with others. You can say, look, are we talking loyalties here? Or are we talking the mode of ethical reasoning we're using? Are we talking facts, or are facts being skewed by our worldview? So I think it's a very useful framework. So second question for all of you, and we'll get back into some discussion again, is around why would Bowen McCoy, who is a ruling elder of the Presbyterian Church and knows something about the parable of the Good Samaritan, why would he pass by on the other side and leave this guy up there on the mountain? Shouldn't he have known better? What in the world is going on with this guy? Let's see if you have any thoughts on that. We need to get a mic here, and then maybe over there, and we get some mics distributed. Yeah.
Maybe he didn't think that the guy, because he was from a different culture, he didn't see the humanity in the guy.
So he simply didn't see his humanity. I mean, sorry, I'm this wasp from New York, and this guy is nothing. Okay, that's possible. He would be really happy with that, I don't think, but.
Hi.
Yes.
Well, maybe he didn't want to bother him, so he just left him. And maybe at the time he wasn't thinking about a Bible verse.
He's not thinking of a Bible verse. It should be on his tongue all the time, right?
But if you see a guy in the mountains without clothes on, I don't think you would think of a Bible verse.
Okay. Got that? We don't always keep our Bibles right, in our pockets, yes?
Maybe he was tempted by the possibility of finishing his lifelong dream of a journey.
He wants to get to the top, right? He's got a goal.
Right.
He's got this goal is really important. That's what he's used to doing on Wall Street, get to the top. Anybody else up there with a mic? Down here?
Maybe he didn't think that it's his duty to help him because there are so many other people, and he did not think that he's in the best position to do so.
Right. So he can, there's other people involved with more expertise, or they have the horse, or they have, and actually he's already done something too. So it's not as if he hasn't been involved. Yeah?
Okay, maybe you were proposing the idea of the dangers of other people, but I still don't see how, if he's climbing these ice steps that are already supposedly dangerous,
yeah.
I feel if you were in the situation of life and death, whether it be helping someone or reaching your goal, I feel morality would tell you to try to help that person instead of trying to reach your goal.
Gotcha. I mean, I understand that, but we're trying to now say, why in the world would he, who probably knows what you just said, why would he not do that? Yes, in the way back. You got a mic?
That me. He may be thinking of a more ends-based approach where if he saves this person, he may be putting his whole travel party at risk, and he's already done something. So maybe he's thinking more that there's going to be another party that's coming up, and he doesn't want to put his friends in danger, and if he is too late, then he will be ending this once-in-a-lifetime proposition. I don't think it's a correct decision, but that may be part of his reasoning.
Okay. Any other thoughts here? I don't know. Apparently that's the winner. Okay, yep.
Yeah, I think there's two possibilities. I think one is that there was never any guarantee that by helping the sadhu that he would live. It also said that he would be going to a hut with no heat, no food, no medical help, and it wouldn't be a guarantee for life, so he would be putting himself at risk and the sadhu still at risk. And also, kind of what Brady said, he was faced with this challenge last time and he got altitude sickness and had to get shipped down. So that's probably in his mind saying he had to quit, he had to turn back, and he failed what he was trying to do the last time, and so he doesn't want that to happen again. And accomplishing his goal is probably his main priority at the moment.
So he probably couldn't have done, just by putting it back in the hut wouldn't have done the trick. You would have had to take it 2 days back, it turns out, to a Nepalese village to have any hope of him recovering, the way actually Bowen McCoy himself had to be taken back 2 days to a Nepalese village previously.
If you read the parable of the Good Samaritan, though, he did the exact same thing as the Samaritan, which was to bring the victim of bandits to an inn and pay the innkeeper to actually take care of the victim. I'm right here, down low.
Swear.
Tie.
There. Okay.
Yeah. So he feels that he's satisfied the requirements of his religion. Whether he's satisfied ethical requirements to make sure that this person actually continues to live or not, that's another issue. But as a good Presbyterian, he feels perhaps that he's already satisfied the requirements of the Good Samaritan Good Samaritan parable as well.
But he hasn't gotten him back to, and paid anybody in the village to take care of him.
Yeah, I know, but he's actually at least continued his life and perhaps can, through methods of modern communication, check in on him the way that the Samaritan said he would check in, when he came through that way again.
He may be dead tonight. There may be no more tomorrow. But anyway,
continue to discuss.
Let me stop at this point. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. I want to get you out of here. Let me just make some summary comments on this. I carry around in my wallet now, ever since I first taught this case quite a number of years ago, a little card called Moral Risk Factors in Living an Ethical Life. And I look at this thing because here are 7 factors that I think were at risk for him, and which made him make a decision. He ultimately ended up going to a seminary for 3 months after this, feeling really guilty about what he did. And he ended up writing a case that went into the Harvard Business Review, which has been taught by many people in many places for quite a long period of time now. And these are the factors, or some of the factors, you've already mentioned some others, which were at risk for him. And if they're at risk for you in any case, you may want to think twice, if you're able, about what to do. Number 1, we've already said, an urgent personal goal. He wanted to get over the top. Number 2, he's at this critical juncture. You know, if he doesn't get over the top, he can lose the next month of his trip. Number 3 is this unexpected and unwanted event. This was not part of the trekking to get this guy's body, dumped at your feet. Number 4, he has a negative role model. The New Zealander just dumps the body and says, you take care of it. So then he takes care of it a little bit, and then he passes it on to the next person. So number 5 is a possible way out. You see the Japanese coming up with their horse, and why don't they deal with it? Number 6 is stress, altitude sickness. Nice for us to be sitting in this warm hall, on a Tuesday morning, but in fact, he was under a lot of stress at the time. And finally, time constraints because of the ice steps being about to melt. So anytime you have one of these factors operating for you, you're at risk of making a bad moral decision. If you have 2 of them, it just doubles that risk, and on through all 7 factors. So if you want, carry one of these cards around. I brought a bunch of them, and they'll be where?
We'll have them in the faculty room.
Have them in the faculty room?
Right now, and then I'll have them in my office.
Okay. So feel free to pick up one of these and put it in your pocket, your wallet, or whatever. And that's it for me. I thank you very much for your engagement with me.
He's too humble to say, but he was the first person to go through Harvard Law School and Divinity School at the same time, get both degrees in 5 or 6 years. So he's got a lot of talents. But he'll be around till 1 o'clock. We'll be in the faculty room for Q&A if you want to stop in. Thanks.